Welcome to the P5 Masterclass videos. You're watching video number 3, Cloud Storage Configuration. Ideally, watch these videos in sequence, starting with the installation and licensing video, followed by either number 2 or 3, depending on the type of target storage you wish to back up or archive to, followed by number 4 or 5, depending on whether it's a backup or an archive workflow you're wanting to set up. By watching 3 of these videos in sequence, you'll be able to install and set up a backup or archive workflow to your desired storage. You'll find more videos to explore in this series on Archiware's YouTube channel. In this video, we begin with an overview of the cloud storage concepts on the whiteboard, then looking at which cloud vendors are supported, how to add their cloud storage into P5, what storage containers are and how to add them for both archive and backup, including running a brief archive and backup job to the cloud, and then looking in the cloud storage to see how we're actually writing the data into the cloud, and then finishing up with some tuning and optimization of our S3 connector. Chapters are all clickable in the description. In this video, we're going to look at how you configure cloud storage in your P5 installation. In order to explain how this works in a bit of detail, I'm going to draw you some pictures. So here's my P5 server, and it's the P5 server that will be responsible for connecting to the cloud storage. So over here, I've got different pieces of cloud storage that I might want to configure. The pieces of cloud storage are generally referred to as buckets, and I might have an AWS bucket from Amazon Web Services over here, but then I might have another bucket that I also want to use with my P5 that's provided by another vendor like Wasabi, for example. There's lots of others, and I might want my P5 server to be able to talk to both of these buckets so that we can both back up data and archive data and restore. So over on the left hand side here, I have my P5 clients, which are basically hosts that have got storage connected or local storage that we want to back up and archive. And so there might be some files over here on this file system that we want to back up or archive. And we want to do that through the P5 server so that that data is then stored in my bucket over here on the right hand side. So in order to get this working, we need to configure the AWS storage and the Wasabi storage. In P5 this is referred to as a cloud service, where we connect up the S3 storage, cloud service, and there's various bits of configuration needed to get this working. So let's just create a bit more space here for ourselves. So in order to add a cloud service, you need to know what the credentials are. Credentials. So when you create your Amazon Web Services account or Wasabi account, you will be given access keys. You can create different keys, different users, different permissions. So those credentials need to be input into P5's cloud service configuration. Then you need the name of the bucket. So we'll create buckets and we'll know what the names of them are. And then finally there's just some tuning, what I'm generally going to be calling tuning settings, where we can do some network optimization stuff to make the upload speed quicker. Depending on the cloud vendor, there might be some additional settings around storage class. Storage classes we'll talk a bit more about in a moment. They are basically sub-products within the bucket where you can choose different types of storage classes which will cost different amounts of money to store data in, and the storage classes will have different speeds of restore, minimum retention policies, all kinds of different variables about the storage that determine different prices. For example, Amazon have quite a wide range of pricing, and I have a slide that talks about that in a little more detail. So yeah, broadly, these things here are needed to set up our cloud services, and so we will do that next in the P5 UI. When it comes to adding cloud storage to Archiware P5, we support these commercial vendors, and in this video we'll be focusing on the Amazon and Wasabi products, and we also support object storage that can be accessed using the S3 protocol from any vendor, including open source products. To create a storage bucket with one of the commercial vendors, you'll create an account and obtain access credentials, put in your payment details and create a storage bucket that you can then use in the next part of this video. Okay, so here we are in the P5 web admin interface. I'm running version 8 for this video recording at the end of 2025. We're going to begin by adding some Amazon Web Services cloud storage for archive purposes. So I'm going to go to the Archive tab, and then under my Storage Manager here on the left hand side you can see both Cloud Services, which we're going to add first, and then Container Storage, which we'll add once we've got the cloud service set up. So to add a new cloud service, we click the New Service button down here at the bottom, and first of all you've got to choose your cloud service provider. Now this can either be a commercial provider like Amazon, but it could also be the generic S3 option, which is not vendor specific, so you get to put in all of the details here, and this could be actually pointing to some on-prem object storage which you've got. If you choose one of the vendors like Amazon, then you'll just be putting in your credentials and bucket name generally, with maybe some additional options. And the other one that we're going to add later in the video is Wasabi, and Wasabi just needs an access key, a secret key and a bucket name. There's no other parameters needed in terms of storage classes, and I'll talk a little bit more about storage classes in a moment. There are a couple of ball options here, so the Snowball and the Wasabi ball, and I think Backblaze have something as well. These are for when you have a lot of on-prem data that you want to move to the cloud, so the vendors like Amazon will actually ship you a disk device on-prem, you copy the data to that, and then it goes back to the vendor, and then they put that data in the cloud for you. So the idea is that you can use this with Archiware. If you wish, you can initially do archiving to that on-prem storage, and then you can switch over to the cloud storage once the Snowball or Wasabi ball or whatever the device is called has been sent back to the cloud vendor. So for our first example here, we're going to use Amazon, and the information that you'll get after you create your account on Amazon's site and configure the access credentials and create yourself a bucket, you'll then know what these three pieces of information are going to be. So I'm going to plumb in my ones, and I've created a bucket called Masterclass Archive specifically for what we're doing here. Vendors like Amazon have different types of storage charged differently, with a bunch of parameters around how it's costed. And you can choose one of those storage classes, they're called storage classes, in this drop down, and that means that all of the objects which P5 creates in your bucket will have the storage class set accordingly, whereby standard is the most expensive and deep archive is the cheapest. And once an object that's been copied up has the storage class attached to it, that object will be stored and you'll be charged accordingly. So if you write all of your data using the deep archive storage class, it will be a lot cheaper than if you use the standard storage class. Here's a slide specifically covering Amazon S3 storage, and you can see with S3 standard on the left going down to the deep archive on the right, and you can see the base price changes from $23 per terabyte per month. So that's the cost of storing 1 terabyte for 1 month, is $23 down to $1 over here. But you can see as you move from left to right, there's a bunch of other factors at play. So for example, there's a 30-day minimum retention rising to 6 months. So that means that any file you store you're going to pay for 6 months over on the right hand side. And then the AZ figure is the number of data centers or availability zones that your data lives in. So you can see that varies as we go across. There's also changes in the access speeds, which is hours on the right hand side, so you can see why this is an archive storage, because you're not in a hurry to get hold of the data if you need to restore something, and you're prepared to trade that off against the cost of the storage. So lots of trade-offs that you can see in there in response for the price changing. So some of these storage services, particularly from Amazon and Microsoft, are quite sophisticated, and you need to have quite a good understanding of how they work before deciding which service to plump for. There's a kind of sub-option here regards how quickly you want to get your data back if you're restoring. So for the purposes of our demo, I'm just going to leave these both on the defaults, and I'll come back to these two options here in a sec. So I'll apply my credentials, and the next thing I'll do is just hit test, and this will make sure that the credentials are correct and the bucket exists, because it comes back with successful connection. There's a more elaborate compatibility test that you can do via this button here, and with a vendor like AWS, these will all come back with ticks. If you're testing against on-prem storage, for example, then you might want to do the compatibility test to ensure that we can do all the things against the bucket that we need to do, which are listed here. Okay, so we can close the window, and then I can see my Amazon Cloud Service sitting there in the list. So let's next add the Wasabi Cloud Service, and we can do that here under the Archive tab, under Storage Manager, in just the same place. We've no particular preference for which cloud service we use here, and as stated earlier, we support lots of different ones. The cloud services apply to both backup and archive, so you'll see cloud services, and it doesn't matter for this part whether you're adding them in the backup tab or the archive tab. They're all the same cloud services. So I'm going to add a new one for Wasabi, and my Wasabi cloud service just needs the access key, the secret access key, which I've got saved here just off screen, and the bucket name. Obviously I've created this bucket already in my Wasabi account, and then when we apply that and test it to make sure that it works, everything is good. So we now have our two cloud services all ready to receive data. Next, we need to talk about something called storage containers. So let's make a bit more space and write down storage containers. Storage containers is the technology that RQA uses to get data into the bucket. So here's a bucket, let's say it's their AWS bucket, and here are a bunch of source files, maybe big, maybe small, on your storage that you want to back up or archive. So the question is, how do we get those files from here to here? And the way that RQA does it is by using something called containers. So a container is itself a file which is going to get uploaded into the bucket. But we do a few special things. So first of all, we'll take some of your source files together and we'll compress them. So there's some kind of zip compression going on. This means that if you've got thousands of small files, they will be compressed together into a larger file. That larger file will get stored in the object store, and that way there'll be less overheads in terms of costs per file access that you would otherwise incur. And it also means that the latency is much better. It's much quicker to upload one big file than thousands of small files. So we're optimizing for both speed and cost by doing this, but we're also able to fully capture the shape of the file system, including all the attributes, POSIX permissions, all of this stuff that's not necessarily supported in the same way over here on the AWS bucket. So over here you've got your file system, and over here the bucket is quite a different thing. But by using containers we can overcome a lot of the issues with writing to object storage, and we do it by using something called containers. So once you've done the cloud service configuration, which is what we just did, we need to create a storage container which will give us a pool and a volume. So we create a storage container, and this gives us a pool and a volume, and then of course we can write our archive or backup data to the pool, and then that will end up on the volume. And unlike tapes where you have lots of volumes, one per tape, with the container storage, there's a single volume for each container, so a volume times 1. Now when you're adding the storage container, we need a folder that will become part of that storage container, and this folder is used to make these zip files, these containers that are going to be uploaded to the object store. So basically we'll be reading from your files, creating those objects inside this folder, and then from there they'll get uploaded to the bucket and then they'll be deleted. But the folder is needed to have this data whilst jobs are running so that these containers can be created and deleted. And in the same way, if you're restoring files, we need somewhere to download the containers from the object store to unpack it, unzip it, and then restore back to your file system. So the next thing we need to do is storage container configuration, and we're going to do one for our AWS object store for archive purposes, and then another one for the Wasabi for backup purposes. And at the same time I will run a quick archive and backup job, and then we'll have a look in one of these object stores, one of these buckets, to see what's actually written in there. So now we need to create a storage container, and we do that under this tab here. So at the bottom you'll see there's an add cloud storage or an add local storage. A storage container can just be using local disk storage with no cloud storage involved, or we can use the cloud storage, and it's possible to have your data stored both in the cloud and on disk if you want. That's an option within the next window. So we're going to click on add cloud storage, and I'm going to connect up that Amazon cloud service that we just created. And then here is a directory box for us to tell P5 where that local storage will be, where we will create those containers before we upload them to the cloud object store, and also download those containers when we're restoring. So ideally you want some reasonably quick storage and a decent amount of space here, as containers might be quite large if you've got large source files. So that's this directory here. And if I just click the ellipsis button next to it, I can browse to my ArchiWare directory, and I'm going to create a folder in here called Archive Cloud Container, because that pretty much describes what we're doing. I could say AWS as well. So there's my folder, and I'll pick it using the select button. So now I've created a folder for P5 to write to that just happens to be inside the directory where ArchiWare is installed. Doesn't have to be. In fact, most likely you're going to want to put this directory on a piece of storage where you've got plenty of space and plenty of speed, because plenty of space may be needed if you're archiving large files, because they'll be written there before they're uploaded to the cloud, and plenty of speed is always going to help with the workflow running nice and quickly. So with the directory input there's a checkbox here to say keep a local copy of your data. So if we tick this box, then the data is going to be written to the local disk, uploaded to the cloud, but also left on the local disk. So any restores can come from the local disk unless there's something missing, in which case they'll be pulled down from the cloud. So by ticking this box, you get your data both on the local disk storage and the cloud storage. But I think in most cases customers are looking to put the data in the cloud, and so it's not necessary to keep this box ticked, and therefore we'll delete anything that we write into this local directory once it's been uploaded. And also when restoring, we need to download those objects from the cloud into this folder in order to uncompress them, reconstruct the original files, and then write those files back to the location that you're asking us to restore to. So this directory is used for both upload and download of cloud data. And finally at the bottom, we get to give the storage a name. This will be the name used for both the pool and the volume. So I'm going to call this AWS Cloud Archive, just to give it a nice friendly name. Hit the apply button, and then P5 tells us that both the pool and a volume and a drive are created as P5 resources. So we can then close that window. We'll see our container storage configured, and then if I visit the pools section, we can see our cloud container, AWS Cloud Archive, and inside the pool there's a single volume And we call this an elastic volume because it has no fixed maximum size. Because the cloud is elastic, this single volume is also elastic. You can write as much data to it as you wish, and it will accommodate that data for you. So now that we have a volume to write to, we can run an archive job and archive some local data to this cloud bucket. Because the storage was configured under the archive tab, the container storage is configured as a pool for the purposes of archive. So you can see our AWS Cloud Archive here is for usage archive. If we wanted to configure backup cloud storage, we'd do it here. We'd create the storage container here, and then the pool would be a backup pool rather than an archive pool, which is what we're going to do next in this video. So given that we have an archive cloud pool created, I'm really quickly going to create an archive plan. Now there's a whole other video on the details of this, but all I'm going to do is create an archive plan where the target storage is our cloud archive, and that's the only setting that I need to make. And I can now use this archive plan to archive something. So if I drop into my manual archiving and look in the data directory on my machine, I can go archive this folder here called Ancil Nance Images. I'm going to hit archive, start the archive, go to the job monitor. You'll see we've got a job running that's archiving that folder. The job finished. So if I now drop to my restore icon, look at the archive index to restore from, browse into data, I can see that I've archived these JPEGs, and when I double click on one of them, you'll see that the target storage where they've been saved is my AWS Cloud Archive container. So these are now in that cloud bucket, and if I decide I want to restore a couple of these files, I can restore them back to their original location. P5 will tell me that it's the Cloud Archive container volume that's needed to recover these files, and then the process of restoring will be pulling the containers back online from the cloud bucket back to that temporary folder on disk, and then putting them back in the original folder. So you can see that's just happening now. So there you go, we just archived and restored data. The orange dot there just indicating that the files already existed that we were restoring. And you can see that we're able to archive to our cloud storage. So the next container we need to make, we're going to use for backup. So I'm here in the backup tab, in the container storage tab, and I'm going to click on Add Cloud Storage with the button at the bottom there. I'm going to choose the Wasabi service, which is not yet used. Again, I will browse for a directory, and just for convenience, I'm going to put mine inside the directory where P5 is installed. I'll call it Wasabi Backup Cloud Container, just to give it its full name. Choose that one. So that's an empty folder I've just created, and I don't want to keep a local copy, and I would like this to be called Wasabi Backup. So again, I apply that one and I can close it. So now I have a second pool called Wasabi Backup, specifically for the purposes of backing up. And there are two volumes, one for the backup pool and one for the archive pool. So I could now go and make a backup plan. So let's do that real quick. I'm going to make a backup plan. We'll take the default name, which you can see in version 8. It puts a timestamp in there, so they're always unique. And I'm going to add a backup task to back up my local host. There's a folder called data, so I'm going to back that one up. Separate video to show you how to do backups. I'm just doing this as a convenience, just to show a backup running to the cloud. And my backup event is going to be writing to the Wasabi backup storage. So there we go, I've made a backup to save the data folder to the Wasabi storage, and if I start that now, there'll be another job running in the job monitor to do the backup, which you can see running there. That will be reading the source data, compressing into those containers, uploading those to the bucket. You can see that happening now. In the job monitor, you'll see some stats about what's going on. Let's make that a bit bigger there. So some stats here. The bottom line tells you how many files, how many gigabytes have been uploaded, and in brackets it tells us how many parallel upload operations are currently in flight against that cloud service. So we'll let that job finish. And there we go, our backup's finished. It took 3 minutes and it backed up about 4.5 gigabytes. If we double click on it, we can see how many files were backed up. So there were 2007 files and folders in total backed up to that cloud object store. I'm now going to show you what this looks like when we're actually browsing the cloud bucket. So I've opened up a new browser window here and I've logged into my Wasabi account and I've clicked into the Wasabi or Masterclass Wasabi bucket, and you can see below under objects what's actually showing up in the bucket. So you see there's a config folder, and then RQware places a copy of its customer configuration, so that's the RQware's configuration effectively gets backed up into the bucket, as does the index. So when you're backing up to a cloud object store, we will back the P5 installation up to that folder as well as a convenience. Under volumes, we'll see that volume 10,002 that maps onto the volume that we saw in here. So the Wasabi backup volume has the ID 10,002. Here's a folder called 10,002, and then inside that we'll find our containers. So then if we drill down through a bunch of folders which are named automatically by P5, we can drill down to the containers, and these are where the files that have been backed up have been bundled together and compressed, and these files are the ones which we've uploaded to the cloud object store. So I'm just showing you this so you can clearly see that the data that arrives in the bucket is not the same as the data from your storage that you backed up or archived. We are writing these containers into the bucket for the reasons that I outlined earlier. And of course we're using Wasabi here as our example, but everything that we're seeing here would work just the same with any of the other vendors. So we're going to finish this video with a little bit of talk about tuning, which is the process by which you can optimize the speed at which P5 is able to upload data to the cloud via these containers. And we're going to look at one of the windows in the UI here. So this is our cloud service settings, in this instance for the Amazon cloud service. And you can see the credentials that we entered here at the top. So this part we've dealt with. Down here at the bottom there are a couple of tuning settings. The first one being parallel operations and the second one being upload part size. So these tuning settings are available for each cloud service you add. So they'd also be there for the Wasabi storage that we added. And I'll explain what these two things do. So starting with parallel operations, just going back to the way that P5 is delivering the data to the cloud. Remember that you've got your files sitting on your storage, and P5 is taking some of these files, it's creating a container, so it's zipping and it's adding multiple files together into a single object if your files are relatively small. And then over here we've got our AWS cloud bucket, and the containers are being uploaded into the cloud bucket. So there's kind of two things going on. We're creating the container, number one, and number two, it's being uploaded to the cloud service. This upload is using the S3 protocol, which is using HTTPS. So it's an encrypted data stream between your P5 server where the objects are being created and then the remote cloud service. Or it's possible that the S3 storage that you're writing to might be on-prem, because on-prem S3 object storage is becoming more popular in the storage world. So it might be that rather than uploading to a cloud vendor, you're using the S3 connector in P5 using the generic storage type to upload to your own storage on premise. So what does the parallel operations do? It basically means that instead of having a single S3 copy operation, you can have two. So, or you could have four indeed, which is the default. So what this means is that for each upload parallel operation, P5 will create a container locally And then because in order to have two, let's say we have two parallel upload operations, in order to have both of those working, we need to have two containers to upload. So that means that P5 makes two containers at the same time, and then when they're ready, they're uploaded at the same time. And the default is 4. So the reason that we don't just have a single one of these running is that each upload operation against the cloud vendor is not going to use the entire bandwidth that you have available to you. Each one is sort of capped at a maximum transfer rate, but by bringing up multiple upload operations, you can optimize the throughput and get more speed than you would otherwise would get. So that's the parallel upload operations. And then the upload part size is intrinsic to the S3 protocol, whereby files over a certain size, and in this case we're saying 1 gigabyte, they will be split into multiple parts, and those parts will all be uploaded via separate HTTPS streams to the cloud vendor. So this is the normal way that S3 works. All of the cloud vendors support this, and it means that if you're uploading a relatively large file and one of the upload streams has an error and terminates for some reason, you haven't got to start uploading the large file from scratch. You can just start re-uploading the part that failed, and they'll all be assembled back together when they get into the S3 target object storage. With P5 by default, if your file, which in our case is a container, is bigger than 1 gigabyte, it'll be split up into multiple parts and uploaded as multiple streams. So again, this optimizes the throughput that's available to us through your internet connection and generally means that things will run faster. If you have lots of smaller files, or you feel that it's necessary for the multi-part to happen with smaller files, then you can use this menu to change that value. So these two settings in the cloud service are the main way that you tune P5 to optimally upload using your internet connection. Okay, so that just about wraps up our video cloud storage configuration in this masterclass series. That includes also how to install P5, how to configure LTO storage, how to create backup and archive plans. So please check out the whole series, and thanks for watching this video. See you in the next one. Bye.